What's up everybody, Zach Evans here again, and today we're going to be talking about the 3 keys to conquering your piano performance anxiety and how to maximize your percentage chance that you will have a rock solid performance. Then we're going to talk about the myth behind just be confident and just don't stress out, and talk about why you can't think your way out of performance anxiety. You have to take specific actions to get yourself out of performance anxiety. And at the end we're going to talk about a huge mistake piano players make when they start to get desperate with curing approach anxiety, why you want to avoid that mistake at all costs, because it can be very dangerous to your piano playing down the road. All right, enough chit chat, let's get started. All right, first things first, let's just get one thing out of the way, the big elephant in the room. There is no cure for performance anxiety. It does not exist. What we want to do, it's not about curing it, it's about doing 2 things. First, diminishing it and trying to fill that void with confidence as much as possible, which you can never do 100%, but you can do it to some extent. And the second thing we want to do is strengthen our ability to play well even when we have anxiety. So even when you're scared, you're nervous, your piece is solid enough that you're able to play it in spite of those emotions you're feeling. Those are the 2 things we want to focus on. So here are the 3 things we want to do, and this is the order of importance. First thing, this is going to sound obvious, but you have to have your piece performance ready. Now, I will say, you have to understand there's a difference between having a piece learned and having a piece solid and performance ready. Think of it like if your piece is a rock, right? If you've learned the piece just through repetition, repeating it over and over, you have one string holding up that rock, and any little nudge of the rock, any little wind will break that string and your rock will come crashing down. Now there's a system that you do 7 days before you actually perform that basically you practice in different ways, so your mind memorizes your piece in a bunch of different ways, visually, muscle memory, and a couple other ways, that basically attaches a bunch of strings, puts some duct tape around your rock, and so that if one of your memory systems fails, the other ones will be able to catch up, and your piece will still keep on going. That's a whole big specific routine. I'm gonna have that one in part 2 of this series. That's gonna be in the next video because there's so much that goes into it. But the part I want to make sure you understand is this is the most important part. The other 2 things I'm going to talk about in this video supplement, and they only work if you have your piece rock solid. Not just learned, but rock solid. All right, the second thing we want to focus on is a concept called progressive desensitization. Now, this is a scientific term that based on fear basically means the more you expose yourself to fear, the lower your fear levels will be. Which sounds obvious, you know, if you're scared of spiders, but you're around spiders constantly, eventually you will no longer be scared of spiders, or your fear of spiders will go down tremendously. Now, a lot of people don't understand and get frustrated with is your anxiety can go back up. It doesn't just go down every time you perform. How I like to think of it, I call it the ladder system. Basically, if you perform, let's say you're at a level 10 anxiety, right? If you perform at a level 10, by the end of your performance, if you do 2-3 songs, maybe even more than that, it'll go down to a 5, right? Because you're kind of getting used to it, you're getting into your pieces, and by the 3rd song, your anxiety might be at, let's say, level 5. Now, if you perform again within about a 2-week span, instead of starting at a 9 or starting at a 10, you could start your anxiety at a 9, and you can bring it all the way down to a 4. If you play again within 2 weeks from the last performance, you'll start at about an 8, and you can bring it down to a 3. And if you keep continuing that, you'll be able to bring it down to about a 5 or a 6. Now for me, if I'm doing solo piano type stuff, I've never got it below a 5 or a 6. At that point, you just have to say, okay, my anxiety's at a 6, and then it's learning to play through that anxiety so that you can get through a song or 2 and bring it down to that 2 or 1 level. Now, the thing is, if you don't perform within about a 2-week span, it'll go back up. Let's say you're at an 8, right? And then you don't perform for, let's say, a month. It'll go back up to a 9, and if you try to perform again, it'll be back at that 9 level. If you wait 2 months, it might be back up at a 10, and it goes back up, and then you have to kind of bring it down. So it's important to know that, because a lot of us don't perform a lot. A lot of you, especially if you're just starting out, you might only perform once every 3 months. Well, it's going to be at that level 10 every time you perform. So what you want to do is try to get as many performance opportunities as possible so you can progressively get that lower and lower. But like I said before, it's never going to be at 0. So the key thing, the biggest thing is that number 1, which I'm going to have in the next video, the exact 7-day leading up to your performance, the exact things you do to build your confidence, to build up your, put all those strings on the rock, duct tape that rock up nice and solid. So even if you're at an 8 on performance anxiety, you'll still be able to push through it and your memory will still hold and everything. So that's the second thing, is progressive desensitization. All right, third thing you want to focus on is attitude and mental state. And before I say anything about this, listen, most people think this is the most important part of overcoming performance anxiety, is just like thinking your way out of it. This is number 3. This is like, you have to have your piece rock solid. You have to progressively desensitize yourself to the fear. And then the third thing, the last part, the cherry on top, is trying to get your attitude and your mental state really good before your piece. Now this part, the other thing about this is, I used to hate when people would say, oh, just be confident. Oh, don't worry about the audience. You know, they don't really care that much anyway if you mess up. Which is true. If you mess up, most audiences aren't going to boo you off stage, you know, unless you're somewhere huge in the industry or something like that. But the point is, that is not a practical step. Saying just be confident, anybody who's been nervous before a big event and just thought in their mind, yeah, just be confident. You could say that 100 times in your mind. It's not going to translate to you actually being confident. They're just words in your mind. What you have to do is figure out actions that put you in a more positive mental state. And like I said, you will never get your anxiety down to 0, but there are steps you can do to take it down. Even if you're at a level 10, it's your first time performing ever, taking it down to maybe an 8 before you get on stage. So I'm going to share with you what I do and what some other people do before they go on stage to get themselves in that mental state. So this is something that's a little different for everybody, but I hate that answer because that's not practical advice. That's just basically tell you what's different for everybody, so just figure it out. Yeah, that's not practical at all. So I want to give you ideas of what people do. So me personally, if I'm about to go up on stage, I'm like backstage or something, this is what I do. I take 3 deep breaths, and then I get super hype. I get hype, I get arrogant, I get cocky, and I learned this actually from sports. I noticed the people that perform well under pressure are the people that are kind of cocky. They got that chip on their shoulder, they're kind of arrogant, they kind of think that their stuff doesn't stink, if you know what I'm saying. And I'm not saying you have to be arrogant in your life, but I'm saying for me, before performance, I go through, I'm like, man, I'm going to blow this audience away. Like, I practice out, I'm gonna freaking dominate this piano. This audience is not gonna know what to hit them. And I get hyped, I start jumping around, I'm like, let's freaking go, baby! Let's freaking go, baby! And I know, this looks really weird, I know. And I'll say, even before I shot this video, I was doing that same thing. I'm sitting there jumping around, I'm sitting there, like shadow box a little bit, I get hyped. And that works for me because I go on stage and it tries to supplant that fear with just arrogance, cockiness, and fearlessness. And for me, that's what works. Now for other people, that doesn't work at all. I know one guy who literally sits down and meditates. I mean, he literally gets cross-legged, meditative stance, and he just like follows his breath for like 10 minutes, and then he goes out on stage. It's great. I've tried that. For me, if I just follow my breath, I end up, it's like, it gets all the thoughts out of my head, and then they just get filled with more thoughts of, don't mess up this note, don't mess it. So it doesn't work for me, but for him, it works great. I know one girl who literally, she's just very chatty. I'm very jealous of this. She's just backstage, chilling. She's just talking to the stagehand. She's, oh, how's your day? You know, what are you up to? Boom, she just walks on stage, performs. It's unbelievable to me. I'm like, I don't know how you can just sit there so nonchalantly before a big performance. It doesn't work for me, but it works for her. I know one guy, this is the funniest to me. He literally will put in headphones, listening to like heavy metal screamo music. He's sitting there like air drumming, freaking air guitaring, like getting into it. And then he walks on stage, plays beautiful Beethoven, beautiful like slow like Debussy lullaby type of pieces. But it works for him, and he's figured out the system that works for him. So what I'm saying is, don't just sit there and think your way out of it. Don't just sit there and think, okay, I'm gonna be confident. Just be confident. Don't mess up. You know, you can't think your way out of it. You need action. So body movement, that could be jumping around, that could be doing deep breaths. You need some kind of kinesthetic thing, and then use music as well. Some people like listening to relaxing music. I hate listening to my piece. I do not suggest listening to your own piece What happens to me is I start thinking about my piece too much, and then I'm like, oh, don't mess up that spot, don't mess up that spot. You know, I don't know anybody actually that listens to their own piece before they perform, but try different kinds of music, and eventually you'll find kind of that system that works for you. All right, lastly, I want to talk about one thing that a lot of piano players do when they get desperate with performance anxiety, and you should absolutely avoid these like the plague. And I almost even hesitate to tell you about this because I don't want some people to hear about it and start to become curious if you've never heard of these before, but I think it's important you know the information. There's this thing called beta blockers. Basically, it's like pills you take and they just knock out all your emotions. So you just go out there and you're just like basically a zombie at the piano, but you have no fear. You just like go out there very nonchalantly and you can play. I've never taken these before, but my piano professor in college said when he was starting off, professional piano player touring around the nation, he got so nervous that he would take these things. And he said, there's a couple things. One, it leads to very emotionless playing. You're sitting there like a zombie. You're not getting into your pieces. You're just sitting there. You know, you'll hit every right note, but you're not moving an audience. You're not captivating people. You're not doing anything that's going to push you to the next level. But the second and even more dangerous part of it is remember we talked about progressive desensitization? If you're taking beta blockers, you're never learning to deal with that anxiety in a natural way. You're not learning strategies to bring it down naturally. You just pop a pill and, oh, I can play forever. So you're never actually improving your ability to perform live. You're not improving ability, and that's even more dangerous because you might think, oh, I'm doing great every time, I never mess up a note. But you're not improving at all, you're just plateauing at the same level. And if you ever don't use a beta blocker, if you're ever at a party and people are like, dude, play a song for us. I mean, you're gonna tank because you don't have that experience. So it's really important to actually build that experience in. So whatever you do not take these drugs, these beta blocker pills that they have out there. All right, that's all I got for you today. Remember, the second part of this series, I'll put the link in a video like somewhere on the screen right here or something, we'll go into exactly the preparation. So I'll say, okay, 7 days before your piece, what do you do? 6 days before, 5 days before, then the day of, what do you do that morning? What do you do an hour before your piece? What do you do 10 minutes before you go on stage? I'm gonna go through that whole process. It's very specific. And remember, this is taking a rock, putting some duct tape on it and sticking it to the wall so your piece is rock solid. And it does two things. It's gonna amp your confidence up and it's gonna get your piece more rock solid. So make sure you watch that video, and that's all I got for you. Peace out and happy practicing.